Thank you.
Do I switch this on? No?
You want us to switch on?
Is it necessary? It is necessary, yes. Well, thank you very much, Roni Mamwepa, Minister, Oliphant, Director General of Labour, colleagues, and all of you who are here. It's a pleasure to see you. Now, we're going to be covering the issue that we were given to attend to by the President almost 2 years ago in 2014. In the wake of the labor instability that the country went through with prolonged strikes and strikes that were quite often violent, and also on the issue of wage inequality, which exacerbated poverty and inequality in our country. The government, as led by the President, felt that this is a matter that we should give attention to, that the government could not just carry on without addressing these two critical issues that have an impact on our labor market. In that regard, the President then, as you all recall, asked the Deputy President to lead a process at the NEDLEC level involving various partners, labor, organizing the 3 federations that are part of NEDLEC, Cosatu, NACTU, as well as Fedusa, as well as business, the various business federations or organizations that are involved in NEDLEC, as well as community-based organizations through their various formations, and government as composed of various departments. A meeting of social partners, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, that spoke to the President, but it's reporting to their Central Executive Committee, which is going to be meeting in 2 weeks' time. To the agreement of wage inequality in our country, as well as stabilizing the labor market. They provide further momentum on our national effort to tackle poverty, to tackle unemployment, and also to tackle inequality. They respond, these agreements that is, to the constitutional injunction that we have to the restoration of dignity of our people. And we have, through these agreements, I believe, set a firm foundation towards the realization of the living wage, a principle now adopted by all at NEDLEC. And just to be clear on this, what we arrived at in terms of the national minimum wage is not a living wage. I will get into some details on that. But this forms a firm foundation of moving our country towards a living wage. It is a start. These agreements are the outcome of nearly 2 years of deliberations, as I said. They are a response to the call that was made by President Zuma in the Declaration on Wage Inequality that was signed yesterday, and labor stability. The social partners confirm the principles that have underpinned their deliberations and which form the basis for the agreements that have been reached. They assert that the most immediate national priorities are the creation of jobs on a massive scale, the reduction in inequality, and the alleviation of poverty. Extreme levels of wage inequality, in particular, contribute in significant measure to the persistence of widespread poverty in our country and serve to constrain economic growth as well as social development. They also assert that accelerated economic growth, higher rates of investment, improved productivity, and faster job creation require a stable labor market environment in which the rights and responsibility of all stakeholders are respected and are also promoted. In pursuit of these objectives, the social partners have reached agreement on the modalities for the introduction of a national minimum wage of 20 Rand an hour to be implemented from no later than the 1st of May in 2018. This figure translates to about 3,500 for those who work a 40-hour per week and about 3,900 for those who work a 45-hour week. But because workers calculate their earnings on an hourly rate, the panel that we had appointed to advise us highlighted the issue of the 20 Rand, and the 20 Rand translates for 40 hours per week over a month to 3,500, and over a 45-hour week over the full month to 3,900. The national minimum wage, which is a floor below which no worker may be paid, will significantly improve the lives of millions of low-paid workers and begin to address the challenge of wage inequality in our country. At its introduction next year, South Africa will join several countries around the world that have implemented a national minimum wage as an instrument of economic as well as social development. The social partners have resolved to set the national minimum wage at a level that has meaningful impact on the wages of the lowest paid worker, while minimizing any negative impact on employment. In other words, in arriving at this figure, which, by the way, was recommended by the advisory panel, which did thoroughgoing research and reflection, we're seeking to balance the issue of increasing the wages of up to 6.6 million workers. Truth be told, we are a country where 6.6 million workers still earn below 3,500 a month. Now, this wage could easily have been 20,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand, could easily have been 5,000 Rand. In doing so, there would have been a negative impact where many workers would have lost their jobs by the introduction of an overly high minimum wage. But at the same time, what we are seeking to balance is that the wage that we set in place should have an impact of lifting the lowest paid workers, so that those workers, 6.6 million in our economy, who are earning below 3,500, should see their wages go up. And by so doing, we begin the process of reducing income inequality. And as I said, this is not a living wage. This is a wage below which we're saying no worker in South Africa should be paid. Right now, 6.6 million workers are earning way below that 3,500. Now, quite often it is said nobody can live on 3,500, and it is true. But 6.6 million workers are living on that today. We would like to see a living wage for all workers in South Africa. If we get to the living wage that we all desire, it will wipe out a lot of jobs. But what we are saying is that we now need to begin in earnest on this journey of improving the income of our workers. And many of these workers are not even unionized. Many of them do not even belong to unions. And these are workers that we need to care for. Now, what this will also do is to give unions a platform to be able to advocate for higher wages, living wages, and so forth. Now, the balance that we've sought to strike is to say the minimum wage must not be too low as not to have an impact on 6.6 million workers, but it should not also be too high to lead to massive job losses. Now, this national minimum wage will be overseen by a National Minimum Wage Commission, which will be established to recommend annual adjustments to the level of this wage. In other words, we foresee a process through which, having started where we are, this national minimum wage will be adjusted on an annual basis. The national minimum wage will also be regularly reviewed to take into account the impact of the level of unemployment and poverty and inequality. And when the National Commission takes into account, it will need to take into account a number of factors when it reviews the national minimum wage and also adjust it. It will have to take inflation into account. It will need to take our GDP growth. It will also need to take ILO, in other words, International Labour Organization guidelines. It will also need to take a number of other benchmarks in the economy and also the impact on employment. Businesses that are unable to afford the national minimum wage will be allowed to apply for an exemption. There may well be businesses that feel that they are not able to afford this minimum wage, and there could be a number of them. And rather than close their operations and retrench workers, we're saying they should come forward and apply for exemption, and the exemption will last for a year, and they will need to give reasons why they want to be exempted. And any fragile sectors that are having difficulty in complying with the national minimum wage will be considered for assistance within the available means, including through incentives. In other words, we are going to put in place a number of measures that will seek to assist those businesses that may be having difficulties. We are essentially saying businesses should not opt for closure, reduction of hours, retrenching workers. We are saying assistance will be put in place for them to come forward and argue their case. So we will put in place a number of mitigating factors so that we do not have massive job losses. The social partners in NEDLEC will finalize discussions over the next few weeks on issues such as the National Minimum Wage Commission's institutional arrangements. They will also finalize matters such as the daily working hours and the status also of the expanded public works program participants. The commission will be made up of 3 representatives from business, from labor, and from community-based organizations, and we will also appoint 4 independent experts who will constitute this commission, who will now be setting the national minimum wage on an ongoing basis. And the Department of Labor will be in charge of that whole process. The question arose, so that we are clear on this, on whether participants in the extended public works employment program by the national minimum wage or not. Now there are 2 positions. The one position is that they should be excluded because they are not fully described as employees in the classical sense, because they are paid a stipend. And they are also protected in some ways in terms of decent work provisions, but they are not classified as employees. The other proposal is that they should also be covered. Now, in the term of this administration, as some of you will know, there will be 6 million participants who will be covered, who will participate in extended public works programs. Some of them do community work, some of them work on fire, some of them work on water, as many of you will know. The partners in NEDLEC are still going to engage in discussions on this matter to finalize their thinking, and thereafter there will be a conclusion and an announcement on whether they are covered or not. Significantly, the parties have agreed on a need for an evaluation on the quality and working conditions of people engaged in all these public employment programs. So that program will be evaluated to see how best it is working. The social partners will be undertaking extensive public consultations following this announcement to inform the public, to inform working people all over the country about this. And we would like to invite all and sundry, employers and trade unions also, to be out there to explain to our people how all this will work. As part of a comprehensive set of measures to improve labor stability, the social partners also signed an accord on collective bargaining and industrial action, in which all social partners commit to take steps that are necessary to ensure that the collective bargaining process in our country is a bargaining process that is engaged in positively, that all parties to a negotiation process in the workplace commit themselves to working according to the rules, and also that we should prevent violence, intimidation, and destruction to property, and also to improve the capacity of the social partners and the agencies to resolve disputes peacefully and expeditiously. The accord stresses that by all means we should find ways of resolving our disputes in a peaceful manner through negotiations. They have also adopted a code of good practice on collective bargaining, industrial action, and picketing that provides practical guidance on collective bargaining, the resolution of disputes, and the resort to peaceful industrial action. The deliberations have resulted in an agreement on the proposed amendments that will be effected to the Labour Relations Act to strengthen provisions of the extension of bargaining council agreements, picketing rules, strike balloting, and the resolution of industrial disputes through mechanisms such as advisory arbitration whenever there are difficult strikes. When implemented, these proposed amendments will provide employers and working people with mechanisms to resolve disputes more effectively, as well as expeditiously, and minimize the potential to have protracted and violent industrial action. The agreement signed yesterday underlined our conviction that working together as government and business and labor and communities, we are always able to achieve a great deal. This is a process that has proven over and over again that when the four parties are able to sit together, they are able to resolve any problem. These agreements give us hope that there is no challenge that cannot be overcome. In conclusion, I just wish for myself to extend my gratitude to all the members of the Committee of Principals who guided this process, for their contribution and commitment to ensure the success of the process. I also wish to thank the advisory panel which we appointed to advise us on the level of the national minimum wage. They did a great deal of work, and they also brought a great deal of insights and wise counsel. And we thank them for that, because through their work they laid the foundation to enable all the social partners in NETLAC to be able finally to grasp the nettle and arrive at an agreement on the level of the national minimum wage. Our deliberations in the course of the 2 years show that social dialogue in our country remains necessary to resolve a number of problems and challenges. It is still relevant, it is a vibrant process, and it always results in the best results for our people. Finally, I wish to convey my sincere gratitude to the Minister of Labour, Ms. Mildred Oliphant, and also to the President for his leadership and her leadership as well, and guidance in the course of executing this mandate, and for leading and enabling our process of moving South Africa forward. I believe that this is quite a historic development in our country, that we finally have a national minimum wage, which no doubt is not going to make everybody happy and excited, but at the same time, a national minimum wage which is going to lift the income levels of no less than 6 million workers who currently are earning below 3,500. Yes, it could have been lifted to any number you can choose, 5,000, 10,000. It could have led to dire consequences with more loss of jobs. At this level, we believe we've created a balance that gives us a platform to begin the process of improving the income levels of our people. And let me stress once again, this is not a living wage. This is not meant to be a wage that people can live on. It is a wage through which we are going to lift 6 5.6 million people and give them an opportunity to have the incomes that they are earning a lot higher. But the other historic moment is the fact that all the partners have now been able to get to grips with the issue of labor stability, so that if there are disputes, we now have added processes, added rules, added mechanisms that can enable us. Our strikes become the type of disputes that can find resolution without a breakdown into violence, damage to property, and all that. That was the objective that the government had in mind to address these matters. And fortunately, we found that the partners that we were negotiating with were also willing to address these matters. And let me end by saying, these agreements are not Cyril Ramaphosa's agreements. They are agreements that have been arrived at by a group of people, a group of organizations that are widely representative, that represent working people, business people, community-based organizations, as well as the government. So this is a collective effort. It is not something that was sucked out of the thumb of one person's mouth. It is an agreement that binds all these parties that I've been referring to. With that, I thank you. Thank you very much. Well, they are not going to get the minimum wage, so it means very little to them.
We thank the Deputy President for his address, and right, Meron, we're ready to take questions. Let's just utilize our mics. I can see you, 2, 3, 4, so 5 Joycops. Right, let's take that. Where do we start? We start with you. No. Oh, I'm not with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Marianne Merton, Daily Maverick. When you mention living wage, what would it have been that you would have liked to see as a minimum wage? 12,500 rand a month, perhaps? How does this minimum wage relate to the sectoral determinations, in the sense that, for example, in the farming and the domestic labor sector, the sectoral determinations come out at significantly less of this minimum wage? And how does this minimum wage relate to casual labor, those people who are working 28 hours or less, which is a prevalent in leisure and also in retail? And it's a concerted drive by many employers, the unions would argue, to keep hours worked low, so employers don't have to pay certain benefits that will be due to people working more hours. And again, if you do the 20 rand an hour calculation, the minimum wage comes way short. It comes out to about 2,200 rand. And a last question, if I may, why is this not effective immediately, please? Thank you.
Let's go. Oh, you raised
Chantal Presence from the African News Agency. I've been partly covered by Marianne. Yes. Just on Cosatu, are they agreed in principle with the agreement reached yesterday, or are they going to be meeting and consulting then? I'm not quite clear on that.
Okay, let's switch the mic.
Good afternoon, Deputy President. Paul Becchiato from Bloomberg. The Extended Public Works Program, that is funded by national government. If this minimum wage is increased and applies to the EPWP, that will increase its budget by an order of magnitude of several times, and that could have a possible impact on the fiscus. Has government examined that, determined what, if that just on the 3,500, if that's implemented to it, what the impact will be? And on the other hand, the danger is if government doesn't use the minimum wage for the EPWP, could that not then leave a loophole for other people to say, well, if it doesn't apply to government, therefore it shouldn't apply to us? Thank you.
She's next.
Hi.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Deputy President. Yes, Linda Insoff on Business Day.
Yes.
Wasn't it a bit embarrassing for Cosatu to pull out at the last moment? Surely, I mean, last week it must have been clear that they weren't going to be there and that the signing ceremony would have accommodated that. And also, what's the situation now? Any decision on the strike ballot? Is that now off the table altogether? Thanks.
Sophie Mkwena from the SABC. I just want to find out when do you expect Cosatu to sign the agreement? And the other issue is, how are you going to ensure the implementation of this agreement? There's a tendency among people, when there are agreements, they don't honor the agreement, particularly in far-flung areas in the countryside. You'll find that some employers may agree, but they will not implement. I'm thinking of people who work in a very difficult sectors where there's resistance in terms of change.
Jan Lange from Report Newspaper, Mr. President. Government doesn't do this without doing serious economic modelling. And I'm sure you have maybe more than one economic model on which you did your calculations to come to the figure. Could you tell us the economic model that you used, how much job losses does that model tells you we're going to have? The second question, it seems that some of the level of the minimum wage will even be above some collective bargaining processes. It will undercut some collective bargaining processes, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell us how many workers that are covered by current collective bargaining will receive a better wage after this national minimum that you proposed? Thirdly, exemptions, as I understand it, if I'm not wrong, it will only be valid, there will only be exemptions in the first year, or am I wrong? Will it be a permanent fixture? And will starting up a new business, will that be grounds for applying for an exemption? On the labour stability issues, violent strikes, did you create a mechanism, as I canvassed with a former DG of Labour some years ago, create a mechanism to declare violent strikes unprotected, as is done in some other countries? And protected strikes, did you create a mechanism to reduce protected strikes? We had a strike a couple of years ago in the platinum industry, which was devastating. Did you make provision for that in the labour stability? Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Lester from InvestSA. Deputy President, it's connected to the recently cancelled signing ceremony yesterday, and then late last night, the agreement signed behind closed doors. Was this to ensure that the President had some good news in his State of the Nation address?
That should be the end of this round of questions. We invite the Deputy President to address us. Thank you.
Okay. The Minister will pick up some of the questions this round. No, the signing yesterday was not behind closed doors. We were obviously expecting that everyone would be in the room to sign, for the President also to witness the signing. Now, the timing just got in the way because there was a cabinet meeting going on and we were finalizing a number of things, also with our colleagues in Cosatu, and when we finally got to a point where all the partners said, let us sign, having had clear agreement from Cosatu that we're sorry we cannot be there. We have another process that we've got to get involved in. Go ahead and sign. We are part of this process. We need to report back to our constituency committee. And it was not, we are going to consult. It was, we are going to report, and we are very much a part of this whole process that has ensued. So the President, it was not for the President to have something nice to say. Clearly, the President will be referring to this process, and he will apply his mind on whether we have met the expectations that he had or have not met the expectations that he had. Because he gave us the task, remember, and set us off to go and address this. The colleague from report, did we do any economic modeling? Of course we did, and we were rather pleased that the panel also did. And the panel looked at the various models that have been built. And you must expect that in any country it happens when a national minimum wage is first introduced, there inevitably is a fear of a loss of jobs. And in quite a number of cases, it does happen. The World Bank has been able to apply its mind on this, and we've had sight of some of their conclusions. And they conclude that the fears that people always have, that there will be a bloodbath and a massive loss of jobs, does not always ensue. It does happen, not in the worst way that it may be anticipated to happen. And they even say sometimes it can even be positive. Positive in the sense that the disposable income that comes into the hands of the number of people who you are lifting up could lead to further demand for goods and services, and it could lift jobs because that demand could lead to more production and so on. That is what we are hoping for. We think it is a good bet to take because 6.6 million people who are earning way below 3,500, when they get additional income in their hands, what are they going to do with that money? Put it under the mattress or use it for goods that they need? We think it is going to be the latter. So whilst the Treasury did do some models early and found out that at particular levels we will lose quite a number of jobs, the panel reached a conclusion that whilst they recognize that, it is still important for us to look at the 6.6 million workers who will get additional income and be able to balance that with the number of jobs that could be lost. So, for instance, Treasury came up with a figure that if you went to 3.4 million, you could lose between 500,000 jobs or so and slightly more. That is, pardon?
So you said 3.4?
3.4, yeah. No, 3.4, yes. You could lose up to 500,000 and slightly more.
3.4 million that you left with a wage?
3,400 that you lift, you could lose possibly 500,000 and slightly more. Could be the model, but the panel also said no one can definitely put their finger on it and say we are absolutely certain. Now, people could say, is this a gamble? And our take is that no, it isn't a gamble. It is important to lift the salaries or the income of 6.6 million workers with the hope that there will be an uptick in demand and we could see some positive result. A number of countries go through a dip. They go through a dip and they lift up again. So in order to have a situation where almost 50% of working people in our country earn less than 4,000, we thought that it is a good bet to take to lift the income levels of 6.6 million people. We will still have to see what the evidence is. Now that we've created a bit of a backstop in that we've asked the commission that is going to be set up in the first year, when they adjust the salaries or the minimum wage, to look at the impact that this introduction is going to have. We've said to them, and this will be in their term of reference, we want you to look at what negative impact has the introduction of this wage had on employment. So they will examine that. And if there's been a positive impact, that will then even begin to influence them to review that minimum wage, I would guess, upwards. We had to start somewhere. We had to start somewhere and if you like, create a balance and even play it safe. Will we be criticized for it? Yes, we are being criticized all round for it. But hey, it's better to be criticized having done something and not to be criticized for doing nothing. So we chose to err on the side of doing something, being lambasted, being criticized, being called all sorts of names. But we're doing this for 6.6 million people in our country whose livelihoods we would like to see improved. And those livelihoods will not be improved by slogans. They will not be improved by people standing on the podium and making noises. They'll be improved by real action that we are now taking. Right or wrong, at least we are taking something that will lead to the improvement of the income of 6.6 million people. I've told you about the job losses. How many workers will be affected? I've told you about that, the exemptions. The exemptions will work in this way. A business that is not able to pay this income. And let me start off with the tiers that we have created. Initially, there will be 2 tiers for domestic workers and for farm workers. For domestic workers, we are saying those who employ domestic workers should pay up to 75% of the minimum wage. And we're giving them a period of 2 years. And those, and by the way, let's remember, the domestic workers' wage is currently covered by the sectoral determination, and the minister will deal with that. In 2 years' time, that sectoral determination will have moved quite close to what the national minimum wage is going to be. Because that is adjusted annually. The minister will deal with that. When it comes to farm workers, we're saying they should be at 90%. 90% for 2 years. That is the lead-in period that farm employers are given to lead up. And now, if it gets to a point where they still cannot pay, there is an allowance for exemption application. You come forward and say, I would like an exemption because of that and that and that. And then you are then given an exemption. And we are saying we would like the exemption application process to be efficient, to be smooth, to be quick, so that there isn't an avalanche and a backlog of all these applications. So right now the Department of Labor has started a process of setting up a proper facility and unit to start working on the national minimum wage, because it's going to be a massive task. Those businesses that are not able to wrap their understanding around this will be assisted as much as possible in terms of how they apply and all that. We would like startups also to start up paying the minimum wage. If they cannot, then they should apply for an exemption. And when is it going to start? 2018. Why is that so? This is so because the legislative process could take us that long, but we also need to set the commission and the structures in place so that by 1st of May 2018, the minimum wage implementation starts. Sophie asks, Cosatu, will they sign? Cosatu has asked for an opportunity to go and report back. They've been very much a part of all this process, and they've been in the forefront of making proposals, participating, and all that. So we've agreed that we're going to give Cosatu the time and the opportunity to go and report back to their own structures. And it's all been done on a consensual basis with proper discussion. There is no fracture, there is no breakdown between the process and Cosatu. It has all been done with deep understanding of the processes that they themselves need to go through. And the President has stressed that this is not consultation, as I said, it is more of reporting back to our own structures. Sophie asked about implementation. We are going to set up, as I said, a process, Department of Labor, to make sure that there is proper implementation. Was it embarrassing? The lady from the Business Day asked. No, it was not embarrassing. Cosatu's failure to sign was based on a deep understanding of the processes that they need to go through. So it was not embarrassing on us. It was something that we all understood, and the partners said, this is a component of the NEDLEC process, and they need to be given that opportunity. The strike ballot issue has been addressed, it has been agreed to. Many unions have strike ballot provisions in their constitutions. The strike ballot provisions are embedded in their constitutions, and the provision that we have agreed to is that the unions will comply with their own constitutions when it comes to the strike ballot process. And those unions that do not have the strike ballot provision in their constitution will be given time and an opportunity to inaugurate them or to have them in their own constitutions. They will have to follow their own organizational processes. But everyone agreed that it is desirable when workers embark on a strike to indicate that, yes, they want to go on a strike. I remember even before 1994, in my own trade union days, we used to have strike ballots even for strikes that were not protected. Workers were not protected then. The right to strike was not even in place. And it was used as a very good mobilizing tool because workers became aware that there's a dispute, they need to rally behind their union, and they need to do so through participating in that strike ballot. Chantal, is Cosatu agreed? I've already answered this issue. Paul asked about the EPWP. EPWP, correctly so, the stipends that the participants get is a budget, is a national budgetary allocation, and the debate and the discussion that is taking place is if EPWP participants do become covered by the national minimum wage, it will have an impact on the budgetary allocation. because just with the stroke of that one pen, you'll be able to wipe out. If you comply with the 20 Rand an hour, you'll be able to wipe out up to 330,000 participants a year. That is the negative impact. So that is being looked at. The fact that they are not seen as classical jobs and that they get a stipend, how should they be classified and how should they be characterized? So that discussion is still ongoing, and as I indicated, there are those two sides. But for now, we are saying we are going to have a discussion, and the discussion will yield a particular result. Marian asks, what is a living wage? A living wage clearly is something that is best defined by trade unions. Trade unions are in the forefront of advocating for a living wage, and so it must be. Trade unions are the ones who need to organize workers into their ranks and make sure that they campaign and advocate for living wages so that their members and working people as a whole are able to be lifted. So trade unions are the ones who need to define and set an amount which they will say, this for us is a living wage. And we are agreed, the unions and us are agreed that this is not a living wage. It's not even a debate that this is a living wage. It isn't. So we will need to deal with that. And I'm going to leave the rest to the minister, who will deal with the sectoral issue, casual laborers, hours of work, as well as how those hours of work are impacted by sectoral, by these wage, by sectoral determinations as well as by the national minimum wage. Let us allow the minister to do so.
Well, thank you, Dr. President. Just before the minister responds, I think we need somebody who can assist us to move the mics.
They are moving their mics. Let me just indicate that the statement that the President went through will be sent to you shortly after this press conference. There are 3 documents that are going to be distributed here. They are called on collective bargaining and industrial action, the agreement on the introduction of the national minimum wage, and a declaration on wage inequality and labor market stability. I thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy President. On the issue that deals with on how the national minimum wage relates to sectoral determinations and the collective agreement minimum wages. Firstly, what we must understand is that the national minimum wage is to support and strengthen the collective bargaining. And therefore, those who are earning less than the proposed sectoral less than the proposed national minimum wage, then they will get the level of the minimum wage. But if they are earning higher than that, they will remain in that particular level. For example, the agreements on minimum wages through collective bargaining, they are not going to be affected except if they are lower than the national minimum wage. So same thing will apply to the sectoral determinations. For example, as we have said, the issue of the domestic workers and farm workers, we have agreed that there should be a phased-in approach within 2 years. So that will be the process, because we want them also to be part of the national minimum wage. And the other issue when it comes to casual workers, and particularly in retail sector, if you recall, in terms of the current labor laws, it says a person can be casual not for more than 3 months. And therefore, everybody, it was agreed in terms of what will happen is that nobody should reduce the hours of work based on the implementation of the national minimum wage. But we also agreed that in terms of the minimum working hours, let the Committee of Principals continue to discuss that particular issue, and we have referred the matter to the Committee of Experts, particularly because there were recommendations by them that in case there is a challenge, particularly referring to the construction when it's a rainy day, where the worker will leave home and find that that worker can't therefore work in that particular area because of the circumstances beyond the control of both the employer and the workers. There was a proposal by the Committee of Experts that at least the worker must be paid for 4 hours. And we didn't agree as the constituencies in terms of those hours. And we said, let the panel go back and come up with a recommendation on what informed their 4 hours, and also look at the possibility and also look at the socio-economic challenges in terms of the proposed hours by the constituencies. So that's how we have said that matter will be looked at. But at the same time, Deputy President, let me just add in terms of the issue of the EPWP. In principle, we agreed that there should be exclusions, but also at the same time Labour said no. They came back and say no, can we review that and let us give them the practical reasons why we're saying EPWP must be excluded in the national minimum wage. And also there was a recommendation whether we can consider the tier of the EPWP program. And then we have said let the Committee of Principals relook at the issue, but also we have referred the matter also to the panel of experts. And also I just want to add on the strike ballot, that is part of the proposed amendment on the Labor Relations Act. So that issue, it's there, and there are a lot of amendments that relate to what we have agreed upon, of which immediately, since we have agreed, we said now we are going to finalize that those proposed amendments and table them at NEDLEC as the procedure. But firstly, we have to come to Cabinet and request for public comments so that the Cabinet will allow us to go out for public comments, and NEDLEC will further process those proposed amendments. And later it will come back also to Cabinet, so that Cabinet will then allow us to send that legislation to Parliament. So I think, Deputy President, I have answered all the questions that were left out.
Let me just clarify one or two issues that was also raised. One question was how many sectoral determination, how many workers who are covered by sectoral determination
4.8 million.
would be affected by, who are below this? It's about 4.8 million. And I can give you some of the categories because we've got them here. For instance, the taxi industry, currently at 10 Rand 78. So they are going to be affected. Domestic workers, 11 Rand 31 Rand is what is the determination level at. Private security, 12 Rand 88 at the moment. Hospitality, 14 Rand 15, that's where they are. Forestry, 14 Rand 25. Farming is 14 Rand 25. Wholesale and retail, 13 Rand 92. Contract cleaning, 17 Rand 66. So these are just the 8 sectoral determinations which are below what we are setting in place now. Now, clearly, a number of people would say, okay, we see this, but we would love them to be maybe at 6,000 rand. And when you do that, be aware that we immediately taking all this to closure or non-compliance. And then a number of them then go below the radar screen. And the choice we thought we should make is strike it at a level where you have an impact, but at the same time you are able to preserve jobs and ensure that there is an improvement over time. The hours of work issue was a matter of great concern to trade unions because they said many employers are now going to reduce hours of work so as to avoid paying this 20 rand. We've got a specific provision in the agreement, and the agreement prohibits any employer from reducing hours of work, and it reads, no employer may unilaterally alter downwards conditions of employment and hours of work, including those currently contained in private contracts, sectoral determinations or collective bargaining agreements because of the introduction of the national minimum wage. So we've said the situation must remain frozen as it is, and no employer may do so. So that covers that, and it addresses the fear and the concerns that were raised by the trade unions. Thank you.
The line I've seen there, no, I've seen him, just let's leave the line there. NUMSA. Let's go. NUMSA. That's AN7, right?
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Just too quick on my previous round that you skipped. I'm sorry, I did ask a lot, but on violent strikes, did you create a mechanism to deal with that, and on protracted strikes?
Yeah.
Hi, sorry, it's a very short technical follow-up. When you say that the minimum wage farmers and domestic workers will be phased in over 2 years, is that 2 years from the 1st of May 2018?
Yes.
And I'm assuming that it also applies to the other sectoral determination.
Yes.
So effectively, the minimum wage will only reach 4.8 million of the 6.6 million people in 3 years' time. Did I understand that correct?
No, no.
Let's leave it there. The President will apply his mind on it. Let's say.
Deputy President Linda from Business Day, Linda Ainsworth, just on, if you could just clarify a bit on how the incentives will work, businesses that aren't able to pay, in what manner could they be helped? Thanks.
Thank you so much. My name is Kelvin Normal from ANN7. I just want an explanation, if you all can give once again, what happens now, the process going forward, and is there any a time frame on when will this go to the Parliament? Also, a question posed for the Minister. Minister, are you aware that Anglo Gold Ashanti has issued a Section 189 mulling retrenching of workers earlier this year? And your comment, please. Thank you.
I think that should be the last question from what I can see. Deputy President, before you answer, just indicate that the documents will be distributed to you guys before we end here. And I want to thank all the channels that have taken us live, SABC, ENCA, ANN7, for taking the press briefing live. And I want to thank the Deputy President, the Minister, and the Director General, senior government officers that are present here with us today. Deputy President, I have the privilege to invite you to.
I have the honor to answer, to follow your lead, your directive. My honor. The issue of violent strikes and elongated strikes or protracted strikes was addressed quite a lot, and it's covered in the Code of Good Practice that we have signed, as well as on the Accord. And if you go through those documents, you'll find that they deal with a number of issues that are supposed to be assisting the whole process of collective bargaining, and making sure that where a strike seems to be a long or a protracted strike, there are a number of interventions that can be made, including the issue of voluntary arbitration, where one of the parties can say, let us now go to arbitration. The issue of making the strike an unprotected strike was not addressed, because there's the protection that the Constitution gives to all workers, that they have the right to strike. But at the same time, we said the arbitration process, in which independent arbitrators will come and play a role, will be one of those very effective measures that can be put in place to bring a fresh mind, fresh hands into the strike situation, to get the two parties to see eye to eye and to resolve the strike. The Committee of Principals through NEDLEC felt that if these measures that we're putting in place do not really yield the type of result we want, they are going to get together once again and discuss these matters specifically. Now, this is a new innovation, if you like, that at the NEDLEC level, another structure will be created for discussing this. But the backstop is always going to be, the minister is often approached by all parties in a dispute to try and intervene. So the Minister of Labour remains the backstop. We're putting in place some mechanisms that are going to be of great help. The issue of violent strike is one of those issues that will be addressed. If there are violent strikes, every entity, every role player is meant to deport themselves in a particular way, in a very formal sense, in a way that's cooperative, that will lead to a resolution of disputes in a peaceful manner. So it's all set out in the code and in the accord as well. The implementation, Marion asks, the period between now and May of next year is the preparatory period. The legislation is put in place. When the minimum wage sets in, it is the 20 Rand at the 2018 value. So that is then implemented, and as it is implemented, you are a reductionist, I see, because you are now reducing the impact that it is going to have on a number of those workers. Yes, the sectoral determination will have increased the salaries or the wages, but in the main, if you look at the list I gave you, most of these will not have reached the 20 Rand yet. So, for instance, the domestic workers, it is possible that an inflationary increase will move up their wages from 11 Rand 31 to, let's say, even if it was, say, 10%, it will be another 11 Rand, so it will be about maybe 13 Rand. It is still far off by 7 Rand from 20 Rand. The following year, they will also not be there. So it has an impact on them as well. But they still have a little bit of a leeway, because 75% they need to be there. And you have and then there are bargaining councils, yes, of course. This is another story. The bargaining councils, now what I was giving you are sectoral determinations, then there are bargaining councils. The bargaining councils, just to give you a very quick run, and some of them I read out, but contract cleaning in KZN is 15 Rand 95. It'll impact on them as well, because by 2018 there will not be a 20 Rand close. Canvas goods in Gauteng, it will be 12 Rand 10. Meat trade in Gauteng, 13 Rand 12, and all that. The hairdressing is going to be the most affected, because they're at 6 Rand 11. So there are quite a number of people who are in the hairdressing business where Ronnie goes nearly every week. And the clothing in the Eastern Cape is 9 Rand 8 cents. So the majority, and when we say this is quite historic in that it's going to impact on the lives of 6.6 million, this is not a thumbsuck, it is a reality. Because, listen to this, it even affects workers who are in bargaining councils, where unions are actively involved in trying to improve wages. Now we are saying with one fell swoop, resulting from an agreement of all social partners, not my injunction, an agreement of everyone, these wages are going to be lifted up. Now, my issue has been, we are regarded as a middle income country worldwide. So you are a developing country, middle income, no different from Mexico, Turkey, and then Brazil, and a number of others. But when it comes to the incomes of our people, we are really at the bottom. That is why we are the most unequal society in the world. And through this, we begin to move towards making an impact. It is not going to solve income inequality. But hey, we've got to take some steps, some formal steps that are going to move people up.
All right, well, a very good afternoon. You're currently with News Today, and you've just seen Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa briefing the media out in Cape Town on the national minimum wage. He said that the national minimum wage will significantly improve the lives of the low-paid workers in the country, adding that in its introduction next year, it will seek to ensure that those workers see a gradual upsurge in their salaries year on year. He said they would like to see a living wage for all workers in the country, stating that it also looks to care for those who are not part of any trade unions. He continued to say that the minimum wage needed not to be too high or too low in order to ensure that there are no job losses and also address inequality in the workplace. And for this, he said it needed to take international guidelines like your inflation and the impact on employment, among other things. And he also alluded to the fact that those businesses which cannot afford the minimum wage are able to come forward and apply for exemption, which will last for about a year. And these will have to be accompanied by valuable reasons as to why they should be exempted. He also said now with the various stakeholders, that's government, the private sector and other constituencies working together and signing agreements, they are now able to work towards a fruitful implementation of those recommendations and decisions that were taken. He did announce the minimum wage of 20 Rand per hour, and it will come into effect as of May 2018. Let's take a quick ad break. More news on top of the hour.
AIDS and poverty did not deter Mpumi's success.
Being an orphan or coming from poverty or having...
The process will also get underway, including all the regulations and all that. Minister, I hand over to you for the other question.
Thank you, Deputy President. In terms of the labor relations amendments and the basic conditions of employment amendments, we have sent them to the drafters just to finally look at them and clean them up, and then immediately we'll then present